Hello and welcome to the Regulatory Matters webinar series, brought to you by the Master of Science in Regulatory Science and the Johns Hopkins University Office of Advanced Academic Programs. Today's event features a discussion on perspectives on regulations of dietary supplements. My name is Natalie Koss and I'm the event producer. Please note today's event will be recorded and uploaded to the AAP YouTube channel under the Regulatory Matters playlist. During the program, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function, and we will answer as many questions as possible during the latter portion of the event. With that, I will turn over the presentation to our moderator, Dr. Bill Barrier, Program Director for the Master of Science in Regulatory Science program.
Hello and good day, everyone. And welcome to the third Regulatory Matters webinar. I think I noted on my LinkedIn profile that we soft launched this back in December. The first was on artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we will be continuing to offer these along the way. We haven't quite settled on a schedule yet, but stay tuned. I will be announcing that. We will be announcing that. Just like to take a second just to talk about the regulatory science program at Johns Hopkins. We're part of the Center for Biotechnology Education, the Business and Regulatory Division. So our division has regulatory science, and we also have the Masters of Biotechnology, Enterprise, and Entrepreneurship. So what I call the business science of biotech. So continue to watch as we offer more. Our degree covers everything from food to drugs, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, biologics, and so forth. But today, I am really pleased to say that we have a real expert in the area, Dr. Kantha Shelke. She's one of our faculty, has been at Hopkins teaching for some time. Kantha has recently developed an entire course around dietary supplements that we will begin offering this summer and continuing. We have other courses that we're beginning to offer to the degree, so stay tuned. Many people have asked me, how can we take some of these courses? And there is a way to do so, but I will kind of notify everybody later in doing so. But the quick answer to doing so is that you do need to apply as if you were going to go for the full degree. That means a certain GPA, background, and so forth. And so what we want to do is admit you as if you were going to finish the program. And the reason for that is, in some cases, people who sign on to take 2 or 3 courses say, no, I want to go ahead and complete this degree. And if you do so, you're already accepted and you do not have to go through it again. So with that stated, I want to introduce Dr. Kantha Shelke. And Kantha, before you get started, can you just please give a brief background before the webinar begins? Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about a subject that's very near and dear to me. So my background, I will address in a few minutes. And when you are ready, I will start talking about perspectives on regulation of dietary supplements. Does that sound okay?
It works.
All right. Thank you. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. There's a surprising amount of misconception and misinformation surrounding dietary supplements. This is a category rooted in what nature has provided for millennia to help nourish, protect, and also restore balance in our bodies. While consumers are increasingly recognizing their value and driving a market that continues to grow by leaps and bounds, those, especially in policy, healthcare, and even academia, still lack a clear science-based understanding of what dietary supplements truly are and what they can responsibly offer. That's why today's conversation is so important, and I'm truly grateful to Dr. Bill Barrier, who I like to call him by his first name, my, my mentor, my director in this program, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you again. But beyond clearing up the confusion, we also must reframe dietary supplements not as fringe remedies, but as legitimate evidence-based tools that can meaningfully augment our diets, complement medical care, and play a critical role in supporting public health reliably. To do that, we need a thoughtful regulation from informed professionals and a commitment to bridge this gap between consumer use and institutional understanding. First, a brief but important clarification. I am not affiliated with, nor do I have any vested interest in any of the ingredients, products, or companies or organizations I may present in this presentation. No confidential or proprietary information will be included. So you must be wondering, okay, then why listen to someone who has no commercial interest in the subject? Well, my perspective is rooted in science, not sales, in health, and communication and education, not marketing. My understanding of the science and safety regulation surrounding supplements stems from decades. That's right, decades, 3+, almost 4 decades of work, research and study, beginning in academia, because I hold advanced degrees in the chemistry of natural products, food science, nutrition, physiology, and the chemistry of food processing. Today, I continue to apply this foundation across multiple touch points in the food and supplement industry. It's that ecosystem. So I serve as adjunct faculty at Johns Hopkins. I'm on the faculty advisory board of McGill University in Montreal. I sit on the board of trustees of Sonoran University, which is home to a state-of-the-art molecular biology and phytochemistry lab. Very important. My advisory roles include working with women-led and women-owned enterprises in South America and in sub-Saharan Africa, contributing to some of the WHO initiatives that are supporting female entrepreneurs, because women constitute a disproportionate amount of engagement and involvement in the supply chain of food and supplements, all the way from production, harvesting, processing, handling, producing into different products, taking it into retail, talking about it, influencing the market, influencing their family members, and getting everybody right across. The only place they do not sit is at the very end, where profits are handed out and where decisions are made. So I made it my lifelong commitment to work with them and to make sure that our suppliers and our at this end of the value chain, our consumers, truly understand the depth and the breadth and the value of what supplements can offer. I also serve as a
Dr. Shelke, fabulous. And you made me think of something as you were going through this that I just have to say to everyone on this webinar, is that we really pride ourselves at Johns Hopkins in the quality of the faculty we have. These are not instructors who are just reading from textbooks. They know the stuff. They know the real world. And just hearing Dr. Shelke talk about her background here is a prime example of what we do. We really want the applications there. That's why our program is called Advanced Academic Programs, because we have folks from industry, biotechnology field, startup companies, you name it. So you have really, really, really good things here. And it reminds me as well, while I have the mic at the moment, if there are any subjects you would like us to tackle in the future, feel free to shoot those in the chat box, and we will see how we can get these as part of the webinar series. So with that, Dr. Shelke, I think it'd be a good time to get directly into your presentation, please.
Thank you. So what I would like to add is that at our university, as Dr. Barrier just pointed out, our programs teach not just the why and the what, but also the how. So we have our curriculum includes discussions, assignments that actually teach you how to do. And that's what I like to work on. And how did I learn all about this? Well, continuing my affiliation, just so you know where I come from. I also work with organizations like IFIS, which is one of the largest database of publications, scientific publications in the food industry. I work with Informa, which does a lot of events in the food and supplement sector. I serve as an editor at Prepared Foods magazine and a contributing editor, and at PLMA, the Private Label Manufacturers Association. I also served as a judge focusing on safety in the $15 million Feeding the Next Billion X Prize competition. I contribute to the Nutrition Business Journal, which is a leading, I think it's called the reference market research enterprise in this space. My experience includes investigative work in food safety. So I worked with CBS television as an investigative reporter in food safety matters, as well as collaborations with nonprofit organizations dedicated to preserving and promoting the history and value of traditional foodways. Supplements are essentially a part of our tradition, and we should keep that in mind. So this breadth of involvement, along with what my company does, which is to serve as a scientific and regulatory advisor across the board to countries, to companies that work in this space, I think gives me a unique vantage point to observe and evaluate from end to end the science, the safety, and the regulatory landscape surrounding the ingredients that enter our food and supplement pathways, but also keeping an eye on the end consumer and what they know and what they perceive and what they understand. That is very important. So why are we doing this? This why is a very, very important part, because what we're doing is really filling the gap and delivering impact. Supplements have an important and an increasingly necessary role in today's public health landscape. So they can fill these nutritional gaps that's created by our modern lifestyles, our diets, and in many cases, they offer real potential in preventing health conditions before they require clinical intervention. However, despite their growing presence in both consumer routines and in clinical outcomes, there remains a significant gap in education and understanding, particularly among healthcare professionals, first responders, policymakers, about the true role and value of supplements and what they could be. That is why I was focused on developing a comprehensive, first of its kind university offering, a course that will address the fragmented training that is currently in the industry, one that unifies the history, the science, the policy, and practical applications so that we can prepare the next generation of professionals in health, in law, policy, and manufacturing with a regulatory fluency and a scientific grounding that is really important in this sector. But let's start with a historical perspective first. For most of human history, people have relied on foods, herbs, and naturally occurring substances or naturally derived substances to support health and well-being. Long before the term dietary supplement became law or legal, these products were simply regulated as food, especially for those with special medical or nutritional needs. So this category includes vitamins, minerals, specialized nutrition products, and that's what it was in the beginning. Over time, it started to expand with herbs, botanical extracts, amino acids, and something called nutraceuticals, which I'll address later. So carrageenan, cumin, coriander, fennel, these are all used by various cultures as a therapeutic aid for digestion, even though they were also used for other reasons in cooking. So they've been around for quite some time. So while supplements remain a subset of food, they are very importantly subject to different and offer stricter FDA regulations than conventional foods, and definitely distinctly different from pharmaceuticals. Before the passing of this Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, which we like to shorten and call DSHEA, and this happened in 1994, any food that made a health or a therapeutic claim risked automatically being regulated as a drug. And that made innovation and regulation both costly and inconsistent with the product's actual use. The clear definitions are the cornerstone.
Excuse me, I have a question in the chat box here, but I find these things interesting in a lot of ways. I think I've told you before, if I had to start it all over again, I might be an ethnobotanist because it certainly covers some of these things from that perspective. But here's a question. So why do they keep being called supplements when they are primary nutritional needs?
Oh, very good question. The answer to that is food really supplies or serves as our primary nutritional needs. Supplements augment it. So they are meant to add to what food already has. So by definition, and very nicely set me up for this slide, is something that you do not consume as a main meal, but something that supplements. It's something that's small. It could be a capsule, a tiny shot, a tiny piece. So it's not a main meal. It's something that's small that is intended to supplement what food cannot do. And they often do this in cases where sometimes you have a nutritional or a metabolic need. So when you've got a cold and you take extra shots of vitamin C, you have this ginger, these different types of toddies that you make because you're suffering a head cold. All of those are actually supplements. They are not a mainstream food. It is something added to supplement what your food did not provide you. That is a big difference.
Follow-up question. So what do you think the consumers think of this? How are they viewing these as supplements? Do you think some consumers think they can get everything just from taking dietary supplements for their nutritional needs? That seems to be, something that I think confuses the general public.
Absolutely. There are many who think that I can have a really messy diet, an irresponsible diet with all the kinds of foods I like to eat, junk food and stuff, as long as I have my supplements and my daily vitamins. But nature does not work that way. Nature looks for all the components and makes sure that you have the bare essentials and then something added to it. That is why understanding the role of supplements and also understanding when to take it and what happens if you take it incorrectly is an important part of our education, badly needed education. So food now is, as I've already explained what it is, dietary supplements are a subset of food, but drugs in contrast are defined, and this is very important, they're defined for use in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention. You put any one of these words on your food or dietary supplement label, and FDA will be at your door because those are meant for drugs. And that's a very, very important part of it. So very important also, drugs cannot be something you add to food. A key takeaway here is that a food or dietary supplement may be, studied or approved for use as a new drug, but a drug or even a drug candidate cannot be repurposed as a dietary supplement. These legal definitions really serve a critical purpose. What they do is they clarify the boundaries between categories. They make sure that it is all about consumer safety and product integrity across the marketplace. There's something else that matters, claims. You know what claims are. That language used on supplement labels, especially this romance copy used in marketing, which deeply influences how consumers perceive any food product or supplement product. Now, some claims are emotional or aspirational, but all promotional materials, including website, your social media, anything that's 1, 2, 3 clicks away, is legally considered an extension of the product label and your claim, and it must meet FDA and FTC, the Federal Trade Commission standards. And unlike drugs, supplements are not a one-size-fits-all. They span a spectrum of ingredients. So they are designed to complement individual diets. And while we've done some work with single molecule supplements and we've tested them in clinical trials, there are others like botanical blends or complex mixtures of different nutrients. These rely on a combination of traditional knowledge, a long history of safe use, and findings from epidemiological studies to support their health and their role in health. That's an important point. This is why there's a need for a clear, disciplined, and science-informed claim, not just to avoid the regulatory risk, but to build trust and to deliver on the true purpose of supplementation, which is to support, not replace, but to support a balanced and a healthful diet, or to make your diet balanced and healthful. So let's take a moment to quickly see how far supplements have come today. They began as simple nutrients. These were the vitamins and minerals that we knew about, and they were used to support medical diets. Over time, with advances in nutrition sciences, in food sciences, in various technologies, those humble beginnings evolved into what we now recognize as the expansive and dynamic category of dietary supplements. In the US, the story of supplement regulation actually began in the 1920s. This is when there were early products like blackcurrant oil. And I was told that cod liver oil was probably the first dietary supplement in the US. Now, for those of you who are as old as me, you probably had a zealous grandmother who made you drink a tablespoon of cod liver oil at least once a week for all the nutrition that it would provide. But that was a very important thing. But as science evolved and consumer understanding evolved, people started putting these materials into food, and they were laying the groundwork for what we call both supplements and functional food industries. We started looking at this explosion of public health, but there's also a tremendous amount of research that's happening. I did a quick search on PubMed just when I was developing this presentation, and I found out that there were more than 89,000 research articles published just on the science of supplements between 2012 and 2025. That is quite an interest in this thing. So it's really clear. Supplements have moved from the margins to the mainstream, and their role in public health is going to continue to grow. So they've gone from food to function, and this is a very, very important category that we must nurture and grow responsibly. Now, the term nutraceutical is probably something you've heard, and people wonder, is it nutraceutical or dietary supplement? What's the difference? Well, the term nutraceutical was actually coined in 1989 by Dr. Stephen DeFelice, and he was the chairman of the Foundation for Innovation in Medicine, and he developed this as a portmanteau. That's like blending the sound and the combination of two words. So, you've heard of motor and hotel, brunch, breakfast and lunch, things like that. So this one was a portmanteau of nutrition and pharmaceutical. So it was describing food-derived ingredients that offer health benefits beyond basic nutrition. I'm not going to go through this entire list, but I'm sure you've seen this, or you use it, or you are wondering about it. But this concept lays out the foundation of what we now recognize as the dietary supplement industry. It's really important to point out. These are not to treat or cure diseases. Even though consumers associate them with a functional support for everything from immunity and digestion to cognition, heart health, etc., what you want to keep in mind is that they bridge the space between food and function in a way that's both natural and science-informed. So that's an important part of it.
Dr. Shelke, I have another comment in the questions, kind of an interesting one. And if I interpret it literally, this person is suggesting there is no supplementation because of the complex body's chemistry and what have you. And I don't know if I would go as far as saying that, because certainly there are many cases where supplementation is actually necessary or should be. One example is we do know that most, at least Americans, aren't getting enough magnesium in their diet. That's been shown many, many times over. Vitamin C, maybe that may be the case. I'd say that's pretty weak. But I think the important part here is there are roles for supplementation. Some are based on medical situations that you may have where you need more folic acid, as an example, or you may need more B12. But certainly there are all the other categories of quote unquote dietary supplements that one could question in some ways. But certainly there is a role for some degree of some supplementation based on diet, even the diet. So, but this was the point this person was trying to make, that there is no supplementation needed. I'm not going to necessarily agree with that, but it depends.
Well, thank you for asking the question and for so intelligently addressing it. That's important. But there is actually often a need. If you look at how our vegetables, our produce, our crops are grown today, many of them are grown primarily for yield and for other factors, but not necessarily for nutrition. So they're grown for uniformity, how they appear, manageability during production, etc. And something has to give. The USDA handbook number 8, if you follow it, which I have, since it first was published over time, and you just look at something like broccoli, and you look at the sulfur-containing compounds of broccoli 30 years, 50 years ago, and today, you see a very steep decline. And I've heard that broccoli's also been bred and refined to not be as bitter for the super tasters, so more people will consume broccoli. So supplementation now makes sense. Dietary fiber is another one where if we are on the go, and those of you who travel for work and business or just travel otherwise, you know how difficult it is to get foods that are rich in dietary fiber. A dietary fiber supplementation really helps you on those days. So I beg to differ with the person who made this conversation so interesting with the question, but we do need supplementation. And there's ample evidence that supplementation has been used for millennia by knowing moms, grandmoms, etc., to make the difference when a food did not deliver everything. So, but back to my presentation, and this time about how the regulation and definitions really make a big difference, particularly when it comes to claims. So let's take caffeine. This is a perfect example where the intended use and the label claims will actually define the regulation. So if you have caffeine in coffee or soda, it's treated as food. It's consumed for taste, enjoyment, no health claims, and nobody's going to say, well, I actually consumed it to wake me up, but that's really why they do it. And for others, because it's just something for them to do. But if you put that same caffeine in an energy drink, in an energy shot, and you're going to now boost your alertness, it becomes a dietary supplement, and it is subject to different labeling and oversight. But you call caffeine a remedy for fatigue or a way to relieve pain, as it is in anisin, in Excedrin. It's a drug, and it's regulated under strict FDA standards where there is attention is paid to the dosage, the safety data, and clear warnings. So what determines the category, food, supplement, or drug, is not the ingredient, but the claim and the intended use. So label, language, marketing, all of these really rely on disciplined, truthful communication, because that is how you get regulatory compliance and consumer trust. And this is very important. And this is why I insist that understanding the chemistry, safety, and toxicology and the physiological effects of a bioactive compound, and also understanding how it behaves in the body and in combination with other ingredients, because many studies are done as model systems. And I always say ingredients, particularly bioactives, are like children. Single child, model child, everybody thinks they're an angel. Put them in the room with another one or two or three other, they all turn into really, devils. So ingredients are just like that. Understanding that is essential to responsible formulation and regulatory compliance. So what matters is not to convey this information to consumers so they get confused, but so they can understand how to take them, when to take, and what to take. That is what dietary supplements is all about. Now, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act that I mentioned, which showed up in 1994, had a reason as to why it showed up. There were several triggers, and it was a series of regulatory and public health effects that triggered this. So marketers they had understood that ingredients can play an important role in health. They started making bold claims: lowers cholesterol, supports heart health, but they were making this more like a drug claim without evidence that their actual product or their formulation really delivered those benefits. And companies also started sort of taking a shortcut. They were pixie dusting, which is my term for adding trace amounts of particular ingredient, so it shows up on the label, and now the product has can leverage its health halo. And this practice very quickly spiraled out of control. And the catalyst was the health crisis that involved L-tryptophan supplements, which caused, significant Congress concern. And Congress stepped in and said, FDA, you need to do something about regulating supplements. FDA had one framework, the Nutrition Labeling Education Act, NLEA. Using that format, they looked at the claims as they were and decided that supplements should be regulated as drugs. But this strict enforcement stance really sparked a backlash because supplements are not drugs. We do not test, and we should not test supplements like we do the molecules that are used in drugs, because they're consumed over a rather big spread. They're consumed with different ingredients. They're consumed over time. And you can't really make a direct clinical trial type of study with dietary supplements. It's okay if you did that for a single molecule, but if you did it for a mix, that would not work. So they decided that supplements would be regulated as a different category, different from drugs and conventional foods. They would be a subset of foods. They would not be regulated as drugs, but they would have its own place. And that is really very, very important. Now, there's a lot more history and nuances. If anyone is interested in that, come take the class, and we will spend a whole module on just that. Why? Understanding the history is important so that we don't trip over it again, and we make sure that consumers understand, but most of all, trust what we have provided to them. So what's the current state of DSHEA? I thought this slide is important given what's happening currently in this country and across the world. Currently, what we need to know is that we have a dedicated office. There's the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs, called ODSP, that is within CIFSAN, which is the Center for Food Safety and Nutrition at the FDA. It plays a central role in shaping policies and programs that are related to dietary supplements. Each year, they look at the various ingredients, they look at the dietary supplements, and they look at what is being submitted, and they monitor for not only the claims, but also they look at good manufacturing practice compliance and make sure that these violations are on the decrease rather than becoming something that would have to be a major public health issue. What's important is that when it comes to labeling, the FDA actually receives between 3,000 and 4,000 structure function claims, because everybody wants to jump in on this. But compliance is still very, very low. And apparently, less than a third of the firms that submit these notifications are actually getting it, but they're getting stronger and stronger. And we hope that there will be a time very soon with the understanding that people in this industry realize what is the right and responsible thing to do. And that is a very, very important aspect of how supplements are managed.
Dr. Shelke, you just made a point that I think I just have to ask this question. You're talking about safety and responsibility, but I think everybody realizes that there are a lot of things going on a global basis that could significantly raise the price of some of the ingredients that go into supplements, and they come from all over the world, as we know. I would think that there could be a really high chance of adulteration because of that. You know, if your product is $5 and now your basic raw materials, you know, are significantly more expensive, I'm not sure if we have the systems in place to really, you know, police that, for lack of a better word. What are your thoughts?
I think the word you've been avoiding is tariff, correct? Tariff is the word of this this
Sure,
administration.
I was trying to keep it neutral, but you're right.
But let's call it what it is. So yes, it's not just tariffs. Although tariffs are going to upset this apple cart quite a bit, there is a system in place. And the system includes what FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, had already laid out in terms of making sure that enterprises that make dietary supplements have a qualified person within their system to understand they've got all the fundamentals of safety of manufacturing, the good manufacturing practices, requirements, etc. But there's also something else. More than 80% of our supplement material actually comes from the tropical countries, often from developing nations. So FSMA wants to make sure and mandates that anything that has been imported must meet the requirements, the safety requirements of our marketplace in the United States. So there is the Foreign Supplier Verification Program, something we again touch upon, that makes sure that all of these materials come in and that they have been vetted, both the supplier, how they are made, and when a product becomes very popular and there's an explosive growth, making sure that all the others who come into the supply are also equally, mindful of our regulations. Will there be room for adulteration? Absolutely, yes. There's always been place for bad actors, and that is going to continue. But educating consumers, educating people in that particular space, helping them understand not only why it should, why we should be compliant, but also the detrimental effects of not being compliant, I think is bound to make a big difference. Clean up this market space because there's plenty of room to grow. There's plenty of room to serve the market, to serve consumers, and with benefits for all involved. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, that was good. You know, FSMA is in place. It's been around since 2011. And I think, as you know, one of the most important, not the most important, but one of the significant portions that's just coming into place is everything about traceability. And so, you know, when you start thinking about these ingredients, you know, I personally have my concerns. I mean, even recently we had an issue of, what was it, lead in applesauce. And so, you know, I asked myself, how did that get through? So I do think, you know, FSMA is good, but, you know, resources are required. And I think it's something we need to watch out for.
And there's always going to be room for you and me. There's always going to be work for you and me and anybody who wants to enter this space, because that is really something that matters a lot. It's traceability, but understanding what are the ways to be traceable. And if you followed all the right principles, perhaps that traceability is not as critical as ensuring compliance throughout the marketplace, throughout the value chain. I think that all makes a big difference. But here's our regulators. Now, what this organization chart is going to look like, what it looks like today, is going to be very much like putting a puzzle together. So we don't know what the next picture is going to look like, but we do know that there is a tremendous amount of interest in making sure what is coming in is clean, pure, not harmful. And that's an important part of this whole thing. And safety matters. You're spot on. You know, when it comes to dietary supplements, safety is not just important, it is foundational. So this chart is a very big one. It's a complicated one. It's the pathway for determining the safety of dietary supplements. So people who are listening can see how much thought and what all goes into ensuring that these products are truly safe when they get into the marketplace. What is important is that this evidentiary requirements and the kinds of information that has been provided to the marketplace by regulators today are quite vague. And the safety expectations often are, I would call unrealistically high, given the kind of the material. So what we want is a better system, a system that is focused, relevant, but also keeps in mind what the material is, the fact that it's not a food, the fact that some of these materials, and by the way, it's not a one size fits all. Different ingredients and different materials enter this value chain. Some are just single molecules, some are, a bunch of botanical material, but it matters. Are you delivering the flowers, or are you delivering the stems and leaves, which have no value? All of that matter. So we are nowhere near that, but this is where we aspire to go. And this system is in place and is going to continue to be in place, much to, I would say, the dismay of those who are looking at this as yet another regulation. I think anytime you provide something to someone that they're going to consume, you have an absolute responsibility to making sure it's safe and it will do no harm. Physicians take an oath of doing no harm. I believe those in the food industry, particularly those in the supplement industry, must also take that oath of doing no harm and demonstrate that they have done everything to make sure that they are doing no harm. So the DSHEA Act was in 1994, and for 20 years, nothing really happened. But it was a turning point for the supplement industry. But it also explored, it opened the door for innovation, but it also allowed less responsible players to exploit these gaps. And that prompted immediately a closer scrutiny and reform. But that came 30 years later. So in, in 2024, finally, they started looking at this and looking at what are dietary supplement, what are the dietary supplement ingredients, the concept of a new dietary ingredient, the concept of an adulterated dietary ingredient, and making sure that what you are putting in, particularly now with these new ways of making products, so you have something that occurs in nature, vanilla, cinnamic aldehyde, and now you're using fermentation technology to produce it. But are you producing just those molecules? Are you producing anything else that could be an issue? How do we know what you've produced is safe? How do we know that what you've done and your validation is indeed correct? All of these matter. So that is a very, very important part of it. And the key takeaway over here is that dietary ingredients that are present in our food, they were in an unaltered chemical state, but now we've got a new regulation, a new perspective, and we do need to look at how should these be monitored, and are the systems that we have put in place today really doing the job, or do we need to change that? That's why we have all these conversations now about generally recognized as safe GRAS, which was meant for the food industry, for materials entering the food, which the supplement industry usurped to try and show that their ingredients were equivalent to food, but that is not what needs to be done. So there's a big overhaul happening right now, and that's what the new administration is also looking at. And talking about the pipeline, well, the administration is still changing in, but there are a number of shakes and shivers that are going to affect the dietary supplement, and there's going to be significant shift. Some are promising, others could be potentially disruptive. One of the most notable changes is, as you mentioned, the chemical contaminant transparency tool. This is aimed at improving the supply chain. You've got to make it accountable, those who are in that, and making sure you ensure consumer safety. There's also, as I said, a growing push to expand this self-affirmed GRAS. And this is not just for conventional foods, but it's gotten into the dietary supplement, which is not the intended scope at all. But on a broader front, there are a number of other things that are happening. An important one is the rescinding of public participation in department rulemaking. So it's going to do away with large enterprises and corporations coming in to influence with vested interests. So how this all plays out is going to be as good a guess yours or mine. But what we want to know is that compounding all of this whiplash effect of the tariffs, which are fluctuating, this raw material sourcing, which is going to be shifting and which is seriously affected also by the current events in different parts of the world, such as Ukraine, the cost stability, and all of these are going to affect the accessibility of dietary supplements. So all these changes reflect a regulatory crossroad. Science, politics, and public health are going to be interacting and intersecting in an increasingly complex way. But here's the reality check. The supplement market has grown. It's got remarkable growth. It was, 4,000 products in 1994 when DSHEA was acted, and it was about $4 billion. And in 2024, it had 120,000 products and about 73 billion. That is huge. So they're growing. Why are they growing? They're growing because it reflects a profound shift in consumer behavior. And that's my focus. Remember, we're doing this to make sure our consumers are safe, they're getting what they want, and they are not harmed in any way. And when you look at the dietary supplement market and the way it has grown, and it shows you the various materials that are happening, what it tells you is that people are increasingly turning to dietary supplements. It's not just to fill in a nutrition gap. Now they're doing something different. They want to support wellness. They want to support energy, performance, sleep, longevity. And with that demand comes a growing expectation. Consumers must have supplements that they can trust. As this trend continues, the need for science-based, responsibly formulated, and clearly communicated products is imperative.
Dr. Shelke, I have a really interesting question here in the chat that I think is relevant to what you're saying now. And let me make sure I have it. It says, I was surprised to read there were only 136 NDI submissions since 2021, of which 79 were accepted. Those not accepted were most likely resubmitted and accepted. This seems like a very small number of submissions. And the question is this because most dietary supplements marketed in the US were before the 1984 Act?
Could you repeat the question? I'm not sure I could hear you completely.
Yes, so it states here that I was surprised to read there were only 136 NDI submissions since 2021, of which 79 were accepted. So I guess on one hand, you showed the slide of all this growth, but how many submissions were actually made that corresponds to that growth is probably a better way of stating it.
But there's a lot of chatter, and thank you for that question. There's a lot of chatter about what is happening in the NDI and submission space. I am not up to speed to provide you with numbers on that particular matter as to how many were submitted and how many were rejected or accepted. Please follow up with me and I'll be glad to help you with it. I do work with people who work in that space. But what is important is that the regulators also understood that the industry's understanding of what matters in safety is now changing, and not so as to how many really submitted, how many are actually divulging the type of materials they make. You know, the supplement industry, like the food industry, I compared to that one relative we all have who will give you their recipe for their, their famous brownie, but they'll withhold one ingredient, so you don't know, and you can never reproduce what they make. So our industry has been, for the long time, rather close to the chest with some of their materials. That really has to stop. And so as to how transparent they are, how much they reveal and how much they have revealed, I think all of that is going to change, both with the transparency tools that are going to be in place and the regulatory hurdles that are going to be in place to be able to clear them and to show conclusively that what you've got is indeed what you say you've got, and that what you say you got, you can prove that you have. Does that make sense?
I think that works.
All
So
right.
we're getting close to the hour here.
Yeah.
So
Well, dietary supplements play a very essential role in public health. I don't need to go through all of this, but what they offer is nutritional, it's much more than nutritional deficiencies. They actually have a very important role, and they have an important role both for our current lifestyles, our current practices, and the way food is made, and our choice of foods and what we want to do. And that is a very, very important part of it. So I'm going to continue to harp on this one. Science informed, quality assured, and supported, not only by this information, but also with clear education. Education helps you distinguish hype from, what is not true. And that is an important part of it. That education, I think, is really important because there is a case for a comprehensive education, because with this growing demand, with what's happening in the current environment, there's also a growing risk. And supplements are widely used. The number that used it during COVID have not really declined as much, but there are people who use supplements all around the world. They're called different things in different countries, but people also come to the US because the US is leading in innovation on how supplements are produced and manufactured and how the various delivery mechanisms. But there are also some safety misconceptions. Natural is often mistaken for safe, and people think if I just bring you the leaf and I bring you the pure thing, is that okay? No, it's not. How you consume something makes a difference. So helping people understand this can be a tea, this has to be in a fat-based beverage, etc., makes a big difference. And that's what prevents it also from being misused, or most of all, becoming harmful for you. That is why, understanding what supplements are, what they can do, and providing a relevant regulatory framework is very important. Safety, communication, and education gaps are very, very important. So you want to know about, for clinicians and practitioners in public health, they need to understand what the drug supplement interactions are, because those are underreported or not even understood. What are the legal restrictions on health claims? How do you get consumers and patients to actually disclose honestly so you can understand it, so everybody can understand it? And how do you make sure that they are not afraid of medics and those in the medical practice because they lack the fundamentals of supplemental science and they're afraid of being admonished for it? But here's what's important. What consumers know and don't know is critical for this area. So what's often unclear is how they're made, what are the regulations, how do I know they're safe, what is it that it contains, does it have the right things, how do those things affect my body, are they trustworthy? And what they want to understand is also, do they truly work? How do I know that they work? And how much should I take? And are they safe for me and my family? Every producer in the supplement space must answer that. So this describes the fragmented supplement landscape, from the learning, the limited professional training, the topic-driven events, the topic du jour, that is really what takes people out there. And then, the sparse academic integration and the demonization or vilification of this by certain siloed enterprises when it should not be. There is plenty of room for all. And so what we really want is to have students and professionals gain proper knowledge that is comprehensive, not be in this fragmented space. So what a comprehensive education covers is, as I mentioned, history, understanding the global regulations, making sure that safety is science and evidence-based, understanding the US regulatory practices, because they're coming into this country, they have to meet our standards, and understanding the gaps and the emerging issues, and there are many of them, so that we can go from what is loosely defined as a supplement to something that is very, very relevant and useful and can go a long way to help with public health. And with that, there's a lot of fragmentation. We use the word dietary supplement, but it's not a one size fits all. The number of categories, the supply chains, how they work with each other. They all depend on the material and how it is used. So that's an important part of it. I always like to end with this particular slide because as we navigate this complex and rapidly evolving supplement landscape, we need to remember something. The path to hell is paved with the best of intentions, but the road to good intentions is paved often with plaintiff lawyers. Clear science, transparent communication, and sound regulation are not just ideals, they are safeguards. Let's work together to build a marketplace that's not only innovative, but is also truly trustworthy, worthy, and safe for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shelke, and to everyone. This is just the tip of an iceberg. Dr. Shelke has developed a 15-week course on this in terms of the fall as well as the spring. Our summer semesters are only 12 weeks, but we pack the same information in there. So if you're interested, please go online, check out our programs. If there's some questions that you want us to follow up on, please reach out. One could argue that we could have another webinar just on this subject. I'm sure we could. But thanks so much for everyone attending. This will be on our YouTube channel, probably by next week for those that are interested. Spread the word about this webinar series that we'll be doing. Next subject has not been selected yet. And as I said initially, if you have some ideas you want us to touch, just let us know. Thank you, everyone. Have a very, very good day. Thanks again, Dr. Shelke.
Thank you, and thanks, everyone. Goodbye.